Legendary singer Barry Manilow revealing tonight he's been diagnosed with lung cancer. The 82-year-old sharing the revelation to fans on social media. Manilow putting his concerts on pause and preparing for surgery.
Barry Manilow has spent more than 60 years giving audiences reasons to celebrate, but 2026 has quietly become the hardest chapter of his career. Behind the sequins and the sold-out arenas, the man behind Copacabana and Mandy has been fighting something far more serious than a bad review or a slipping chart position. What started as a routine checkup after months of bronchitis turned into a cancer diagnosis that has followed him through nearly every stop of what was supposed to be his farewell tour. So what exactly has been happening to Barry Manilow, and why does it keep getting worse? Let's get into it. The diagnosis that changed everything. For most of 2025, Barry Manilow was doing what he has always done, filling arenas and theaters with the kind of orchestrated sentimental pop that made him one of the best-selling artists in music history. He wrapped a 5-night run of Christmas concerts in California that December, seemingly in good health and good spirits. Then, within days, everything shifted. Manilow revealed that he had been battling 6 weeks of bronchitis, followed by a relapse that lingered for another 5 weeks and refused to improve despite treatment. Concerned that something more serious might be going on, his doctor ordered an MRI to rule out any underlying problems. The scan unexpectedly uncovered a cancerous spot on his left lung, a discovery that completely changed the singer's plans for the year ahead. Manilow later described the diagnosis as an incredible stroke of luck in disguise, crediting his doctor's persistence and attention to detail for catching the tumor at such an early stage. Because it was found before it had progressed further, surgery remained a realistic and potentially life-saving option instead of a desperate last resort. The diagnosis placed the singer, then 82 years old, in the difficult position of having to choose between pushing through a demanding tour schedule or stepping away to protect his health. He chose surgery, and with it came the first wave of postponed shows, a wave that would end up being nowhere near the last. Shortly after the operation, he shared a photo from his hospital bed, smiling in a green gown, and told fans simply that he was feeling better. The image, posted to Instagram, drew an outpouring of support from longtime fans who had followed his music for decades and were not ready to imagine a world without him on stage. Stage 1 lung cancer is generally considered the most treatable stage of the disease, since it means the tumor has not yet spread beyond the lung itself. And doctors were able to move quickly precisely because the spot was caught before it advanced any further. That early timing is part of why so many entertainment outlets framed the discovery as a stroke of good fortune buried inside otherwise unwelcome news, a distinction that mattered enormously to fans trying to gauge how serious things actually were. What made the diagnosis especially jarring for fans is how it arrived. There was no long build-up, no rumor cycle, just a sudden announcement in the middle of what should have been a triumphant victory lap. Fox News reported that Manilow shared a positive health update from a hospital bed after his lung cancer diagnosis, telling fans he was doing better following surgery to remove the cancerous spot, a moment that briefly reassured supporters before the real difficulty of recovery set in. Early detection had bought him a chance, but chance and certainty are two very different things, and the months that followed made that distinction painfully clear. By early 2026, the tour that had been billed as his final run through American arenas was already in jeopardy. And the singer who built a career on control, on hitting every note exactly where he wanted it, was suddenly at the mercy of a recovery timeline he could not speed up no matter how hard he trained. To understand why this diagnosis hit fans so hard, it helps to remember just how much history was riding on this particular tour. Wikipedia notes that Manilow has sold more than 85 million records as a solo artist worldwide, placing him among the world's best-selling music artists over a career that has spanned more than 6 decades. He built that legacy on hits like Mandy, I Write the Songs, and Copacabana, songs that turned him into a fixture of adult contemporary radio, and made this farewell run feel like a genuine cultural moment, rather than just another set of tour dates. A cancer diagnosis arriving in the middle of that victory lap did not just threaten a handful of concert dates, it threatened the entire send-off he and his fans had been looking forward to for months. Before we get into just how many shows this recovery ended up swallowing, you need to understand how deep this disruption actually went. What happened next turned a single surgery into a year-long stretch of stops, starts, and disappointments that fans are still living through right now. A farewell tour that keeps falling apart. A farewell tour is supposed to be a victory lap, a chance for an artist to say goodbye to cities that supported them for decades. For Barry Manilow, 2026 turned that idea upside down, transforming his final run of arena shows into a stop-and-start ordeal defined almost entirely by postponements. The first casualties came in February, when arena dates scheduled just weeks after his surgery had to be pushed back, because he simply was not ready to return. He had been pushing himself hard, cycling through daily treadmill sessions in hopes of proving he could handle a full set list, but reality did not match his ambition, and a visit to his surgeon confirmed that his body still needed more time. That February setback led to a fresh round of cancellations, with dates that had been set for February and March getting pushed further down the calendar. By his own account, he could barely sing 3 songs in a row without needing to stop, a sobering admission for a performer known for marathon sets built around decades of hits. Still, he remained defiant about the delay itself, promising fans that when he finally returned to the stage, he would return in full force. That defiance echoed a phrase Manilow has used throughout his career whenever critics or circumstances tried to slow him down, and longtime fans recognized it instantly as classic Manilow, stubborn, sentimental, and unwilling to let a setback have the final word. It was also a reminder of just how physically demanding his live shows have always been, built around full band arrangements, costume changes, and vocal runs that leave little room for a voice still recovering from major surgery. Spring brought a partial reprieve. Rockseller magazine noted that with his stage 1 lung cancer diagnosis treated and being monitored, Manilow was cleared to return to the stage for a series of concerts, and his medical team expressed optimism thanks to the early detection that made the surgery possible in the first place. Rescheduled dates were slotted into the calendar for cities like Tampa, Charlotte, Norfolk, and Baltimore, an ambitious patchwork meant to make good on tickets that fans had been holding on to for months. But even that optimism came with limits. By May, Manilow was forced to postpone his Las Vegas residency dates yet again, informing fans through a social media message that his doctor had confirmed real progress while also making clear he was not fully cleared for the demands of a full residency run. Rolling Stone reported on the update, noting that Manilow shared the good news that his doctor said he was making great progress and looked great, even while confirming he was not yet ready for his upcoming Las Vegas shows. He held on to hope for his summer arena shows and his upcoming United Kingdom dates instead, treating each postponement as a temporary detour rather than the end of the road. By midsummer, the pattern had become almost routine. A show gets rescheduled, fans get reassured, and another date quietly slips onto a growing list, still waiting to happen. For an artist whose entire brand was built on precision and showmanship, that kind of unpredictability was its own kind of heartbreak, both for him and for the audiences who kept showing up anyway. The list of affected cities grew long enough that fans in some regions started tracking it like a running scoreboard. Dates in Charleston, Nashville, Columbus, Lexington, Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Norfolk were all shuffled at various points throughout the year, some of them more than once, as Manilow's team worked to slot rescheduled concerts around ongoing medical checkups. Several outlets covering the tour pointed out that this was not the first time in his career that his voice had forced a pause either. Back in 2017, Manilow postponed shows in Los Angeles and Chicago after straining his vocal cords, proof that even before this cancer diagnosis, his instrument had always required careful, sometimes frustrating, maintenance. What made 2026 different was the sheer scale of it, stretching across nearly every month of the year instead of a single isolated setback. As frustrating as those early postponements were, nothing quite prepared fans for what Manilow would eventually admit about just how brutal this recovery has actually felt behind the scenes. His own words about the process reveal something far heavier than a simple scheduling issue. What Barry Manilow has said about the fight. If there is one thing that separates this chapter of Manilow's career from a typical rough patch, it is how openly he has spoken about just how hard it has been. This has not been a story managed entirely through publicists and carefully worded statements. Much of it has come directly from Manilow himself, in his own voice, on his own accounts. He described his time in intensive care in stark terms, admitting that the experience genuinely frightened him. He spent 7 days in the ICU, a stretch he called terrifying, and confessed that there were moments during that stay when he wondered whether he would ever get the chance to say goodbye properly. That kind of candor is rare for an entertainer who spent decades curating a polished, upbeat public image built around romance and celebration rather than vulnerability. He also opened up about the emotional toll of recovery itself, describing the process as agonizing given how little patience he has for sitting still. Fox News shared his own words on the matter, reporting that he explained the road back had been long, and since he has never had much patience, the waiting itself felt like agony, even as he insisted he was growing stronger with the help of his doctors and the people around him. That mixture of frustration and gratitude has defined nearly every update he has shared since the diagnosis first became public. Much of that support has come from his husband and longtime manager, Gary Keefe, whom Manilow has repeatedly credited with helping him push through the hardest stretches of treatment. In interviews given during his recovery, including a candid conversation featured on the cover of People, Manilow reflected on how the diagnosis reshaped his outlook entirely, admitting that facing a serious illness made him reconsider what he had actually accomplished with his life, and whether he had been the kind of friend and partner he wanted to be remembered as. There has also been a lighter side to his updates, glimpses of the same self-deprecating humor that has followed him throughout his career. He has joked about his grandmother's old sayings, poked fun at his own impatience, and even used a health update to casually announce a new album title, proof that even in the middle of a genuine health scare, he has tried to keep some of his usual charm intact for the fans who have stuck with him. Yet underneath the humor sits something more serious, a man in his 80s confronting real mortality in a way that no amount of stage presence can paper over. During that People cover interview, Manilow admitted the diagnosis had genuinely reshaped how he views the years he has left, telling the outlet the experience made him stop and ask himself whether he had truly done what he set out to do, and whether he had been a good enough friend to the people who mattered most to him. It is a strikingly reflective admission from a performer who spent decades letting the music speak for him, rather than dwelling publicly on his own mortality. That tension between resilience and fragility has become the defining thread of this entire year, and it sets up exactly why the most recent news out of Kentucky landed as hard as it did. Just when it looked like Manilow might finally be settling into a stretch of stability, another cancellation arrived with almost no warning at all. What happened in Lexington is the clearest sign yet of how unpredictable this recovery remains. The latest blow, what just happened in Lexington. If anyone assumed the worst of this saga was already behind him, the first week of August 2026 proved otherwise. Manilow was scheduled to perform at Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky, a date that had already been pushed back once before from an earlier March slot, disrupted by his cancer treatment. This time, the show collapsed with almost no notice at all. WKYT reported that Rupp Arena officials announced on social media that the postponement was due to unexpected and unforeseen circumstances, with the announcement coming just minutes before the concert was supposed to begin. Fans who had already lined up outside the venue learned the news secondhand, through phone notifications and confused whispers running through the crowd, rather than any formal word from the stage itself. The abruptness of the cancellation is what unsettled longtime fans the most. One entertainment outlet described how fans were left disappointed after the concert was postponed just minutes before he was expected to take the stage, and organizers confirmed the show would be rescheduled without revealing what had actually caused the last-minute decision. Comment sections and social media replies quickly filled with a mix of confusion, concern, and quiet worry, with many supporters simply hoping that whatever the reason, it was not a sign of something more serious with his health. No official explanation has been offered publicly beyond the vague language of unforeseen circumstances, which has only added to the unease. Given everything Manilow has already been through this year, from ICU stays to repeated postponements to public admissions of exhaustion, fans have understandably connected the dots, wondering whether this latest disruption is simply routine touring chaos or another quiet signal that his recovery is far from finished. Local news crews covering the venue that night described concertgoers standing in line completely unaware anything was wrong until phones began lighting up with the announcement, just minutes before doors were set to open for the show. Ticket holders were told their purchases would be honored once a new date is confirmed, but for a crowd that had already rearranged plans once before, when the original March date fell through, the second postponement in a row for the same city felt like more than ordinary bad luck. What makes this moment particularly hard to watch is the contrast with where things stood just months earlier. In the spring, there was real optimism, rescheduled dates, hopeful medical updates, and a singer determined to prove his body could still keep up with his ambition. AOL reported at the time that Manilow shared his rescheduled dates after receiving medical advice to prioritize healing following his lung surgery, revealing he was still having trouble singing more than 3 songs before needing to stop, even as he kept up with daily exercise. A small but telling detail about how fragile his voice still was months into recovery. By late summer, that optimism has been replaced with uncertainty, another postponed show, another wave of unanswered questions, and a fan base left to wonder how many more setbacks this farewell tour, billed as his final run of American arena shows after more than 60 years in music, can absorb before something has to give. For context on just how significant his career has been up to this point, it is worth remembering that Manilow's decades of orchestrated romantic ballads made him one of the most recognizable voices in American pop music, a legacy that began with his 1973 solo debut and grew into a run of hits that defined adult contemporary radio for years. He picked up a Grammy Award for Copacabana, a Tony Award for his Broadway concerts, and a spot in the Songwriters Hall of Fame along the way, honors that made him one of the rare pop artists respected by critics and casual fans alike. That history is exactly why this ongoing health saga feels so heavy to longtime fans, because it is playing out against the backdrop of a farewell tour meant to celebrate all of it. Whatever comes next, one thing is already clear. The version of 2026 that Barry Manilow imagined, a triumphant closing lap after 60 years in music, has instead become a story about endurance, about showing up again and again, even when the body refuses to cooperate. Whether he manages to finish this tour on his own terms, or whether the road ahead forces even harder decisions, the resilience he has shown so far says something about him that no chart position or record sale ever could. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.